Hi YouTube! Welcome to day 34 of my birthday countdown vlog. 6 more days until I turn 40. So, when I was 6 years old, it was mostly in 1978, that year the two big things that happened to me was going to Germany for the very first time with my grandmother, and then also starting first grade. So that summer, my grandmother and I got a chance to go to Germany. Her siblings, her brothers and sisters, all kind of scraped up money together to send us so we could, the two of us, go and visit. This was the first time my grandmother had been back to visit since she had first left Germany to move to Belgium back in like 1947. So she hadn't been back to see her siblings at all since 1947. So it was a long time between visits, from 1947 to 1978. And of course she brought me along with, which was really cool. And at the time, I was mostly speaking German. I wasn't speaking that much English yet because we spoke only German at home, and a lot of our friends in Chicago spoke German. Some people we knew in the local church and spoke English, and of course I saw English on TV, so it's not like I didn't know English, I just didn't speak it that regularly. So that brings me to one funny story of when I met my cousins in southern Germany, and they kept asking me, say something in English, say something in English, and I would say, hello, hi, I don't remember. And I would say I don't remember in German because by the time I actually got down to visit my cousins, we'd spent the first, because we were in Germany for 3 months, and we spent the first month and a half at least up in Frankfurt with my grandmother's sister Hilda, and then we also spent some time with her sister Erica, and then we finally went down to southern Germany to see her sister Lena and her children and grandchildren, who were my cousins. And so at this point I hadn't heard or spoken a word of English in a good month and a half before I met them. And at this point all the English I knew just was kind of fading a bit out of my brain. I was only 6 years old, so that was kind of funny. And when we were staying with my Tante Hilda, she was living in a high-rise complex at the time. And one funny thing that happened, I was playing with a friend of mine. It was a girl who lived in the complex, and she and I became friends over the weeks that I stayed there. And we were down in the playground, and I think we wanted to go back home. I think it was time for dinner or something. And so we got into the elevator, and the elevator doors closed, and we were going to hit the button to go up to whatever floor we were going to, and we couldn't reach the numbers. Even like the second floor, everything else, the numbers were too high for us to reach. We were that small. And that was kind of scary because we were in there and we didn't know what to do. The doors wouldn't open again. The door open button was all the way at the top of the list of numbers. So here we are, we couldn't get in, no one was using the elevator, and we were panicking. I mean, we were in the elevator probably no more than 10 or 15 minutes, but it felt like years to us little small children. And we started screaming at the top of our lungs and crying, and somebody out in the hallway a couple of floors above us heard us and started up the elevator, and then looked inside and saw the crying children, and we're like, we can't reach the numbers, and please help us. And they asked us, so what floor are you going to, and they helped us hit the buttons that we needed, and we got home. And that was the last time I ever rode that elevator by myself without a grown-up again, because I was too scared to get stuck again. So that was kind of funny. And I remember going out for long walks with Tante Hilda. Had dogs, and we would go for long walks with her and her dogs. And then when we stayed with my Tante Erika, who was the aunt who lived in a small town farming town and had the bar, we go for long walks with her and her dogs as well when she, on the days that she had the bar closed. So we had a lot of fun, and 3 months was a long time, and it was great fun. Then we come back, and my grandmother apparently didn't know she had to sign me up for school. And I remember at one point we got a phone call, and she was being called by the city saying, do you have a child by this and this name of this and this age in your home? And she was like, yes. Well, why isn't she in school? And she was like, oh, well, I didn't know she was supposed to go to school yet. She's only 6. And so it was, middle October by the time I started first grade instead of the beginning of September. Oops. Thankfully, it didn't count against me. I didn't get tardy or fail first grade because I missed that. But the interesting thing was starting first grade. So they signed me up, walked me to my classroom. So anyway, the first grade class that they took me to, when I was led to the classroom, they were on their way to lunch, and they put me at the end of the line and had me at the end of the girls' line on the way walking to lunch. And the class, as they stopped at one of the intersection corridors in order to let another class go by, so the girl in front of me named Gina, or I later found out her name was Gina, turned around and took a look at me. And this was basically my introduction to the rest of my elementary school career. And she said, you know what? I don't like you, and promptly punched me in the stomach. And so that was my introduction to public school in Chicago, and was a precursor to all of the other bullying I ended up enduring the rest of the year. I mean, I had not said word one to anybody in this classroom yet. They just said, hey, you have a new student, stick her in the back of the line, we'll do introductions later. So hadn't said word one to anybody. She just turned around, looked at me, and said, I don't like you, punched me in the stomach. Obviously, I didn't eat any lunch that day. I was doubled over, and Gina was obviously punished after lunch and everything. I think she got to stand in the corner or something like that. But that basically marked how the rest of my school career went. The other thing that happened in first grade was, obviously one of the first things that the teacher had to do was assess, if I could read or not, could I write, did I know any numbers or any arithmetic or anything. And one of the first things I remember her doing was sitting me down in the back of the classroom and handing me, she asked me, can you read? And I was like, yes, I can read. And she was like, okay, here's a book. And it was one of the Dick and Jane books. And at this point, I was already reading larger books and things. And most of my Sesame Street books had long stories and things in them. And I'd been reading these longer stories for quite a while at this point. I basically learned how to read when I was 4 years old, and I'll tell that story a little bit in more detail later. But so she gives me the Dick and Jane book, and I'm looking at it, and I kind of roll my eyes, and okay, see Jane run Jane run, see Dick run Dick run. So I was kind of sitting there reading it out loud, kind of in a bored voice, like, yeah, whatever, this is like super easy. And she's like, okay, you're a good reader. We're putting you in the advanced reading program. And the reading group was actually going to the program like within like a half hour from then, and she asked me if I wanted to go with, and I was like, well, I was scared, I was nervous, I didn't know anybody yet. So she's like, okay, fine, you can start tomorrow. And basically it was going to a second grade classroom for reading. And the fun thing was that the teacher for the reading program that I was going to be in, the second grade teacher I was going to, ended up becoming my second grade teacher the next year. So I actually had Mrs. Smith for reading, well actually no, I didn't actually have her for all 2 years. I had her for reading for first grade, and then she was my full-time second grade teacher in second grade, but I had a third grade teacher for reading when I was with her. So I kept, being one class advanced in reading. But I was very poor with numbers. I didn't know how to read an analog clock yet. I think I knew how to count to 10, but my arithmetic skills were very lacking and things. And I think I could write, but I couldn't write nearly as well as I could read at that point. So I was only in the advanced reading class, and that was it. But that was kind of fun. And two other funny stories from first grade. One was, I think it was the very first week I was in the classroom, and at one point I needed to use the bathroom. And I didn't know how to ask that of my teacher in English. So I was fairly fluent in English with the TV and the people that we knew who didn't speak German. But there were certain things that I never talked about with people, or you never heard on television. One was, hey, I gotta go use the bathroom. And so I went up to the teacher and I said, excuse me, but ich muss mal, which is basically Frankfurt dialect of ich muss einmal, or I have to go, basically, is what I was trying to say. And my teacher looked at me like, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're saying. And she finally realized, because I started, crossing my legs and holding myself, and she finally realized what it was I needed. And she asked me, oh, do you need to use the John? I'd never heard anyone say, refer to a toilet as a John before. And so I looked at one of my classmates whose name was John, and I was like, no, not John, ich muss mal. I kept saying that, and she was like, oh, hang on, come with me. So she told all the kids to stay put, and she took me to the bathroom, and she pointed to the toilet saying, John, use the John. Because apparently that's what she knew. She didn't, it took her a moment to say toilet, and she said, oh, in my mind, it's like, oh, Toilette is German for toilet, and so we finally understood each other. And by this point, I kind of peed my pants because I couldn't hold it anymore. But we at least finally figured that out, and in the future I knew how to ask how to use the bathroom. That was funny. And then the other funny thing is, I was reading, at this point already, some non-picture books. I was reading some of the books that I was finding in my mom's room, and she had a lot of Barbara Cartlands. Most of the books I could get my hands on on her bookshelf were Barbara Cartland books, which are romance novels. And so I was reading these romance novels, and I was bringing them with me to school to read during recess or whatnot. And my teacher found them in my book bag, and she called my grandmother, and she said, you know what, you might want to find more appropriate books for your child to read. Here's your 6-7-year-old child, and she's reading Barbara Cartland books. So that was kind of funny. And that's when my mom introduced me to science fiction books. So she was like, okay, these aren't appropriate for you. Here, try this book. And it was A Princess of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Edgar Rice Burroughs is well known for writing Tarzan. And I read this book, and it was just like, oh wow, this is just amazing. I loved this book. And it is to this day my favorite science fiction book of all time. Just because it was the first one, and it just transported me to this other world. And I'm so excited that next year they're actually making a movie of the book. They're calling it John Carter. John Carter is the primary character in the book, and is in several more, because I think there's a total of 11 books in the Martian series from Edgar Rice Burroughs, and John Carter is a prominent figure in the first 6 of them. And so it makes sense that he calls it John Carter. It kind of focuses on that character. But I'm kind of worried that they're going to screw it up. I hope they do a good job with it, because so many times good books are made into movies and the movies just don't live up to the books. So I hope they do a good job so that we can see at least the first 6 books made into movies. The last several books, the quality kind of goes downhill, and so they're not necessarily worth making into movies. But the first 6 I think definitely are, so that'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Anyway, that's enough memories. I mean, heck, I was 6 years old and I have a ton of memories from that year, don't I? Until tomorrow, bye.